Hi, my name is Matt Brady, and today I'm going to give a presentation on the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986 and why I believe a similar policy could work today. One issue that has continued to cause frustration for politicians and citizens in the United States is the issue of immigration reform. Paralyzed between the desire to crack down on illegal immigration and the understanding that many of those who have immigrated illegally are now productive citizens with sons and daughters born in the United States, the challenge of crafting acceptable immigration reform that can garner bipartisan support has proven to be elusive. One of the more recent and more important attempts at reforming immigration in the United States was the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, signed by President Ronald Reagan. This is the topic that I chose to study for my project, and my thesis is as follows. Although the overwhelming evidence demonstrates that the Immigration Act of 1986 was not a success, by applying the lessons learned and with the advance in technology, many of the ideas that were not effective in 1986 could be very effective in 2020. Now, why do I believe a policy that is considered to be a failure would work today? First, some background. Throughout history, the United States has based our immigration policies on how profitable our economy was at the time. When the economy is profitable, we let more people in, and when the economy takes a turn for the worse, we shut our borders. What was happening in 1985, the year before the bill was passed, was the economy was thriving. With money to spend and immigration still being a problem, Ronald Reagan saw a chance to let more people into the country immediately, but ultimately set the country up to deter illegal immigration for the long run. So some people may ask, why the need for a new policy? Well, at the time, almost all the agricultural and industrial work was done by illegal immigrants. For example, in the 1900s, 21 million illegal aliens took on the task of doing almost all of the industrial work in the United States. While by 1986 that number had gone down a little, it was still a high number. Also, there were no laws against United States companies hiring illegal immigrants. Without laws against hiring illegal immigrants, illegal immigration was encouraged because if a person were to immigrate to the United States, someone could and would hire them. There were three main goals for the new act. The first goal was employer sanctions. There were three things that were outlawed for employers to do. The first one was the knowing hiring of persons not authorized to work in the United States. The second was the continued employment of persons not authorized to work. And the third was the hiring of an individual without verifying or correctly documenting the person's identity and eligibility to work legally in the United States. The second goal for the act was improved border reinforcement. With the act, a 50% increase in Border Patrol staffing and additional funding was also used to support efforts to expeditiously remove criminal aliens. Lastly, the third part of the act was the legalization of unauthorized immigrants that were currently working in the United States. Illegal immigrants could apply for temporary or permanent residency based on how long they had been working and living in the United States. This turned into over 3 million people applying for temporary residency and nearly 2.7 million people receiving permanent residency in the United States as a result of the act. This act remains the largest immigrant legalization process conducted in history. All of these goals and the implementation of them seem to be the correct source of action. So, was the act successful? The answer is no. The failure was not in the idea, but in the execution. Sanctions on companies were not taken seriously, the fines were too small, and did not actually discourage companies from hiring illegal immigrants. Also, many of the documents given by illegal immigrants to grant them temporary or permanent residency in the United States were fake, and the technology at the time was not good enough to detect it. The failed execution of the act actually encouraged more illegal immigration, because once both companies and immigrants realized that the act was not being taken seriously, and that the punishments for violating the act were not crushing, they reverted back to their old ways, and now we have more illegal immigrants residing in the country than ever. You may be wondering why I would argue that a similar policy could have a positive effect on illegal immigration today. For one, I believe that the lessons learned from the failure of the Immigration Reform Act of 1986 would prevent our current government from making the same mistakes. The failure of the act was not in the plan, but in the execution. Today we have better technology and could learn from the past to better the ideas of the 1986 Act. Technology has also gotten way better since 1986, especially in detecting fraudulent documentation and identification. UV lighting, magnetic strip readers, and ID scanners have made it near impossible to slip anything past your local bar, let alone the government. Secondly, I believe that increasing the spending to bulk up the border enforcement was a great idea, and that we could better it today by also spending money to try and make the process at the border more efficient. Third, I also believe that employer sanctions was also the right idea, but the punishments just need to be harsher. With harsher punishments, companies will be discouraged from hiring illegal workers, and workers will be discouraged from immigrating illegally if they will not get a job. Finally, giving amnesty to those currently residing in the United States is a great way to ensure that the immigrants are given a fair chance in America. As shown in Where the Wind Leads with Vin Chung, immigrating to America can have a very positive impact on a life that otherwise would be a struggle. Amnesty can make sure that the right people are given that opportunity. In conclusion, I do believe that Ronald Reagan and the United States government had the right idea when creating the Immigration Reform Act of 1986. They just were not prepared for the work that was required to make the act come to fruition. Today, by learning from our mistakes, the better technology we have available, and a few small tweaks, I believe a very similar bill could have a positive impact on our current illegal immigration situation. Thank you.